Good evening. We are back to the study of the Spirit's book. We started last week, Law of Society, which is Chapter VII of Book 3. And we went through the necessity of social life, reminding everybody that one of the natural laws is the law of society, that only in society we are able to evolve both morally and intellectually, by learning from others, teaching others, and learning from others. Then we start discussing life of isolation and vow of silence, the selfishness of those that isolate themselves from society, from fear of being contaminated, or from fear to incur in mistakes and in errors. So we read a couple of questions. We are on question 771 that I'm going to ask Philip to read for us. Thanks, Philip.
Thank you. 771. What should we think of people who renounce the world to devote themselves to helping the poor? They bring about their own elevation by lowering themselves voluntarily. They have double merit for placing themselves above material pleasures and doing good by fulfilling the law of labor. And what about those who retreat from society seeking tranquility for certain kinds of labor? Those who retreat from society for such a reason are not selfish. They do not isolate themselves from society, since their work is for the general good.
So here we are seeing examples when either isolation or detaching yourself from the material world is a case of elevating ourselves. So those that leave behind their comfort to help, dedicate themselves to help the poor throughout all these organizations, the non-governmental organizations we have around the world. The spirits say here, they have double merit because they are placing themselves above material pleasures and doing good by fulfilling the law of labor. So they are practicing charity to the most rewarding way of doing it, which is to help, to renounce to your own comfort to help others in their own needs. And of course, those that isolate themselves in search of peace and tranquility, to develop some kind of labor that is going to help society as a whole. So a scientist that decides to isolate oneself to help in their work, to have tranquility and for discoveries, they are not isolating themselves for societies. They are working for the general good. Of course, the isolation at the time of the book, that Spirit's book was written, you could go into isolation in different ways of today, because today you can go into physical isolation but still be connected to society through the communication means that we have, the phone, the Zooms, and the other ways. So as society evolves, we find new ways to stay connected to others, and we need to learn to take advantage. So how this is helping us, and it's putting us in contact with several people out there in the world, allowing us to acquire knowledge that in the past was more difficult, and being able to isolate ourselves if we are in need of rest, of doing our work in isolation. Of course, everything that is taken to extremes creates a problem, so we need to understand where the lines between isolating ourselves for our needs or isolating ourselves to avoid being in contact with others, because we have a necessity to be in contact with others. That's important in terms of human contact is very important. I was listening this week to a lecture by a spiritist speaker, and he was talking about the importance of those going back to the spiritist centers, the importance and the human contact, how much it was helpful to those that went back to the spiritist centers. Of course, not everyone is able to, and there are different reasons for not being able to, but in general, we should try to avoid getting too comfortable in our own little corners and avoiding society because we are either lazy or too comfortable. So we should take advantage of the possibility of have this type of meetings, but also balance the need to be in personal contact with others. Okay. Questions, comments here? Okay. Last one, Philip.
772. What should we think of the vow of silence prescribed by certain religious groups since ancient times? You should ask yourself whether speech is found in nature and why God has created it. God condemns the abuse, but not the use of faculties that have been gifted to humankind. Silence is useful because you gather your thoughts when you practice it. Your spirit has more freedom and can enter into more intimate communications with others. However, a vow of silence is absurd. Those who view these voluntary deprivations as acts of virtue are prompted by a good intention, but they make a mistake in doing this because they do not truly understand God's laws. The vow of silence, as the vow of isolation, deprives human beings of the social interactions that provide the opportunities of doing good and fulfilling the law of progress.
Yes, so the spirits remind us here that everything that we have is for us to use. Our intelligence, our reason, and our senses, those that possess the gift of mediumship have to use it to the benefit of humankind. If you have a mouth, it's for you to speak. If you have ears, it's for you to listen. And of course, as they say, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth because we should listen more than we should talk. But it doesn't mean to not talk at all, because this is absurd. We have this resource and we have to use. To live in society is to connect to others and to use all our senses. So as the spirits say it here, very clear and very direct, a vow of silence is absurd. Because with that, we are isolating ourselves. The vow of isolation, the vow of silence, all these acts that deprive us from living in society, they are normally selfish. What's the use in that? So that's what we need to ask ourselves. How useful we are with doing that? Why are we doing that? What's the end that we're doing that? And again, we are not going to say that 100% of them are condemned, but there will be very few exceptions for both vow of silence or vow of isolation. Of course, to enter into silence, to connect with the spiritual world at times is always important, to gather our thoughts, as they say here, and to be able to enter into communion with our higher self. But to transform that in a perennial state is, as they say here, absurd. Okay? Questions?
I think there's two questions deal with the topic of intention and two reasoning, and when applying any of those things with the proper moderation, not going too far to one side, not to another. The usual, they stay at the middle, right? The example of using the ability to speak is fundamental for the development of society. How can we learn from others if others would not use the means of communication that we have? So silence is important. More important many times to be able to listen, right? Perhaps equally important, if not more important. And being careful not to allow ourselves to become too far from one side or another. And I think the example of given here of perhaps excesses in the use of technology and leaving aside some fundamental things of human nature, like the law of society, like being able to go to a temple and being union with peoples that share this common interest that can exchange energies is something very valuable that you're not going to get with Zoom. And those carry its value as well. So it's the ability of being reasonable and do not allow ourselves to lose things that are very precious to us in the name of comfort or in the name of some crazy dogmas. For example, vow of silence.
Okay. Family ties.
Hey, João.
Yes, Renato.
So what do you do when, for example, kids nowadays, they don't play outside anymore like they used to. And it's not sometimes because they don't want to, it's because it's just technology and the way they interact, the way they, they do things nowadays is pretty much virtual, online, or whatever. So what can we do once we get to a point that this human interaction is no longer accessible, let's put it that way? What do we do with kids, what do we do with ourselves? Because after, COVID and everything, there's a lot of jobs that they never get back to what it was. They pretty much stay online or whatever.
Yeah.
So what's your take on this?
We evolve and adapt. What we shouldn't expect is for things to go back to how they were. That's, the other day I was listening to someone talk about exactly about that, discussing, it was a psychology spiritist discussion, and someone said, oh, when I was young, I used to go out in the street and play with other kids and go into other kids' houses, and nowadays kids don't do that anymore. How can we make them do that? And the psychologist, the spiritist psychologist said, we cannot expect things to go back to how they were. We have to adapt to the new times and to learn how can we use the technology and not abuse technology, right? So it's important for kids to play, to have their time to be away from technology, to play. But technology is a part of their lives, and to completely make them avoid technology is not going to help them grow. So they have friends that are not close to them anymore. That in the past you have friends in your neighborhood, and that was it, right? School or neighborhood. Nowadays they have friends on the other side of the world, which is great. They can learn from different customs, different opportunities. The the challenge is for us to balance how long they stay connected and how long they have to stay away so they can work on their individual abilities away from technology, right? Again, we don't have a recipe for that. We don't have. We are learning as we go. But one thing that we have to have in mind is that the law, which is the next chapter we're going to study, the law is of progress. So things are going to change. For better or for worse, things are going to change. Things are going to continue evolving. We need to adapt and we need to learn and we need to try to use it to our advantage and to our kids' advantage. But how exactly this is going to happen? And again, our kids, when they are our age, they are going to be discussing the same thing, right? When I was a kid, I used to do this and that, and nowadays those kids are doing something completely different, which I have no idea what it's going to be in 30, 40, 50 years. But it's one thing is I can assure, it's going to be different and it's going to be progress from where we are today. So again, we are not perfect spirits. We are learning. We are going to make mistakes, but we have to respect the law of progress and try to adapt and see how we can use it to our favor and to their favor.
Is it possible to evolve intellectually? I believe we can, but evolve morally through those virtual relationships? Yes.
You know, they can enter into contact with struggles out there, with abuses and things that will allow them to develop compassion, to develop sense of community, of helping and assisting, depending on what they are watching, right? We have to be careful with that. But yes, it is. All these tools are for our intellectual and moral progress. But normally, as we are going to see in the law of progress, that we're going to study very soon, the intellectual progress goes before the moral progress in most cases. So at a certain point, we have to evolve morally to catch up with the intellectual progress.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think our relationship with technology today is we are like kids in a candy store with daddy's credit card. It's everything very new. We are in the process of learning how to deal with this. We're gonna get some belly aches because of abusers with the candies and daddy's credit card until we figure out how to balance things, how to be able to have some candies that are good for us, but you're not going to hurt us. So it's everything right now is a learning process. My hope, and of course I'm biased, is that the things that is essential for us in our human nature, like living in society, have experiences as kids with friends side by side, we will return to a certain point. Because again, technology is not going to go away. Internet's not going to go away. The games that kids play online is not going to go away. But they will reach a proper balance to live with technology in a healthy way. Because right now it's still learning how to do it. Again, we are just kids on a candy store with that credit card.
I read the other day about a group of teenagers here in New York City that decided to abandon smartphones. They have just flip phones to communicate with their parents because their parents forced them, but they decided to live outside of the technology, and they go they meet in the park, they read books, they discuss about the books, they talk about their lives without any technology. again, it's the you go to one extreme, you have the reaction to the other extreme, right? What we need to find is balance. I'm not criticizing these kids because I think it's a very good experience. It's very valid experience, and I hope we can all learn from the experience. And I think they help balance the two sides. But again, they are not going to be able to avoid technology in their lives. It's part of their lives. So you know, any place that you are going to work, you need technology, right? I was talking to someone the other day that works remotely, and she works remotely by herself in a place that her company has no office or anything. And I asked her, how often do you go to the office, the main office? And she said, never. We can do everything online. She works in marketing. As she said, we can do everything online. I don't need to go to the office. And actually, very few people go to any office. We can do everything online with the technology. So, you know, this is progress, and again, creates a problem of lack of interaction, personal, human interaction. But can it go back? I don't think so. I think it's moving forward and finding common ground, moving forward, right?
Yeah, you see the technology that advances so fast, and we have such a short time to adapt to everything, that one of the problems that is happening now is that kids no longer know computer. They only know smartphones. They have a problem to use computer because they only know smartphones. You see how accelerated is the technological progress right now, that we're gonna have to, it's not stop, but we're gonna have to start to see that we're gonna have to accommodate the human needs in accordance with technology advancement. And that takes time.
Yeah, trial and error. That's our evolutionary process, right? We evolve by making mistakes and learning from our mistakes, right? When we repeat the mistakes is when we create the karma, right? So good luck, Renato, you that have small kids.
Yeah, I was, in terms of kids, this is not a big deal. I was thinking about religion while, you know, you and Elmo were talking about, because that's one of the things that, you know, some religion, they are trying to apply technology and virtual praise, whatever they're trying to do these days. And I'm thinking what you said about adapting, and I'm just comparing the mechanics, that how things works today on the in-person energy and everything with technology. But yeah, maybe this is another discussion.
Yeah, again, it's like everything else, right? We evolve and adapt. How it's going to end up, we don't know. But, you know, we are going to talk about law of progress maybe this week, or, yeah, start this week, but sure next week. And we're going to discuss a lot of this. But before that, we have family ties here to end the law of society.
773. Why is it that in the case of animals, parents and children forget each other when the latter no longer need to be cared for? Animals live a physical life and not a moral life. The tenderness of the mother for her young is prompted by the instinct of self-preservation for her offspring. When these beings are able to take care of themselves, her job is done. Nature asks no more of her, and she abandons them to busy herself with the next newborns.
Okay, so here the difference between humans and animals, right? Animals have only instinct of self-preservation, and they care for their offspring for the time their offspring need help and care. And once they no longer need, they are become independent. They even no longer remember the relationship, right? There is no family connection in the animal kingdom. It's just the mother protecting their offspring until they become independent, and then they are on their own. Humans are different. We have more than instinct. We have morals. We have the intellectual development. So we need to live in society. And the basic cell of society is family. So we need to preserve our families and to grow in family. And actually, the next question Kardec asked, insist, and the spirits get kind of annoyed that he keeps asking about comparing humans to animals. But we know that we are different than animals, right? So let's read the next two, Philip, because the last one is too small.
774. Some individuals have inferred, based on the abandonment of young animals by their parents, that human family ties are merely a result of social customs and not a law of nature. What should we think of this? Human beings have a different destiny than animals. Why do you always want to make them equals? For humans, there is something beyond physical needs. They feel an instinctual need to progress. Social ties are necessary for progress, and family ties strengthen social bonds. This is why family ties are a law of nature. God wants men and women to learn to love one another as brothers and sisters. 775. What would be the effect on society if family ties were relaxed? It would lapse into selfishness.
Okay, so first the spirit says here that and they ask why Kardec tries to keep comparing humans to animals, because we are different than animals, and we know that. We have when we become humans, we have free will, we have intelligence, we have continuous thought process, different from animals that have interrupted thought process. And we need to progress. Animals do not progress. We need to progress morally and intellectually. And in order to progress, we need social ties. And as the spirit says here, family ties strengthen social bonds, right? Without families, it became more of a chaotic society. We need to learn to love one another. And the basic place to learn to love one another is in our families, right? With all the problems that come with that. Without families, we would be much more selfish. And we see that people that leave their families behind for different reasons, there is a tendency to become much more selfish, to think about themselves only. It's not a general rule, of course, but there is this tendency. So family is very important, and we know from studying Spiritism the importance of family, eternal, in terms of eternal ties. We see the cases of mothers that are still, after 500, 600 years, trying to rescue their sons or daughters from the lower zones, trying to rescue them from their inferior tendencies because of love. And this is family ties that are eternal. Again, as we continue to evolve and to progress morally, our family, spiritual family, only grows. It never diminishes. We keep adding more loved ones to our spiritual families, and more connections as we evolve. Okay? Questions? Okay. Law of progress. it is a natural law. According to Spiritism, we are always progressing, even when it doesn't look like. There are two wings of evolution, the moral and the intellectual. The moral is the more difficult one, as we know well, because we have to eliminate the imperfections and to add virtues, or to learn about to fill the cups of the virtues we already have and are not, don't know how to use them. But the intellectual progress is an accumulation of knowledge. So everything that we learn stay with us as eternal spirits. We may not bring for an incarnation, or it may become dormant in an incarnation, but it's never lost. So everything that we learn stays with us. And that's why it's important to continue learning no matter what age we are, because it comes back to us when we need it, okay? The first item is state of nature. State of nature is the basic state of society, it's the starting point of civilization, right? It was well discussed in the time of Kardec by Rousseau, Hobbes, and other philosophers and humanists. The state of nature, you can find it, the discussions and publications about it in magazines and of the time of Kardec, in the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century. So it's important for us to understand when we are talking about these couple of questions, what is state of nature? Is the primitive state of civilization before we had laws, before we had lived in society, organized society, okay? Okay.
776. Are the state of nature and the law of nature the same thing? No. The state of nature is the original state. Civilization is incompatible with the state of nature, while the law of nature contributes to the progress of humankind. The state of nature is the first phase of the human race and the starting point of its intellectual and moral development. Human beings, born imperfect and containing the seed of their betterment, are not destined to live in the state of nature forever, just as they do not remain in the state of infancy. The state of nature is brief, and human beings outgrow it through progress and civilization. On the contrary, natural law rules humankind as a whole. People improve as they understand this law more clearly and mold their actions to adhere to it.
So one of these philosophers talking about the state of nature, he said, at the time we were in state of nature, there were two men and two different opinions. And you had 10 men and 11 different opinions. And for them to agree on the opinions was a reason to start fights, killings, and wars. Until we decided to organize ourselves in society and start to build laws to regulate societies, we lived in this state of nature. So that's the first phase of human race, as Kardec explains here. Now, the natural law is God's law. It's the law that governs nature, and it's a perfect law that allows us to progress, and by respecting and learning, we evolve both morally and intellectually. So these are the differences between state of nature and the natural laws or law of nature. Okay.
777.
Yeah.
In the state of nature, people with fewer wants do not have many of the tribulations as human beings who are socially more advanced. What should we think of the opinion of those who regard the former state as being that of the most perfect happiness that can be attained on earth? What do you expect? That is the ignorant bliss of the brute. Such happiness is that of an animal, but there are people who know no better. Children are also happier than adults.
Yeah, spirits are talking here about those that think that getting rid of everything that makes us live in society and going back to the natural state or to nature, to live in nature is what's going to bring us happiness, because they believe that seeing some primitive societies, they think that they live happier. And I remember watching a documentary on a tribe in Brazil, and they were talking about this group of people. There were only three, one woman and two men that lived together in the middle of the jungle, and they both shared a woman, and their occupation throughout the whole day was to find food for them to survive. Men go out and hunt, bring the food to the woman that would prepare the food for them for the day, and then next day start the same thing. So if that's what we think of perfect happiness, it's difficult to understand. So the primitive nature is not a nature of happiness. The spirits talk here about children are also happier than adults, which may be the case because it's the innocence of children, right? But the law is of progress. There is no way we can go back, because we cannot unlearn what we have learned, and we cannot get used to the difficulties of what they call here state of nature, that we don't even know how to survive in that state nowadays. We are so used to, different comforts of our physical material lives that to go into a state of nature would be a very quick end to our physical lives, more likely, or a state of complete unhappiness, not happiness. Okay.
Hey, João, what do you call the behavior that humans still have nowadays that's similar to the state of nature?
What do I call?
Yeah, because since we are past that already, but we still do atrocities nowadays, killing and stuff like that. That pretty much is what we were doing in the beginning when we were not aware, when we were not morally evolved, but we're still doing things that remember this kind of behavior. So you call that just violence and stuff, or there's a different denomination for that?
We call it the prevalence of our animal instinct over our human instinct, right? We go back to the animal instinct that we have it to act on our inferior tendencies that we bring from the evolutionary path in the things that we haven't overcome yet, and to act on our inferior tendencies. But
so it's not related to the state of nature anymore.
No, I don't see it being discussed nowadays, state of nature, as they used to discuss at the time of Kardec. I did some research. At the time of Kardec was something very still discussed, but we see today people that talk about going back to living in the jungle as the recipe for finding happiness. We still have people that think like that, right? So it's kind of regressing to the state of nature, we could say, which is the next question, actually. But again, if that was to bring happiness, we would have a vast majority of people doing that, right? Because we have so very few people that are looking for that. we can imagine that that's not something that is the solution of our problems, right?
778.
Yeah.
Can humankind regress to the state of nature? No, humankind must always progress and cannot return to the state of infancy. If they progress, it is because God has willed it. An assumption that people can revert to the primitive condition is to deny the law of progress.
The law of progress, it's a natural law. We cannot go against it. Even if we refuse to progress, we are progressing, because eventually we will learn that the refusal to progress is what causes us to stay behind, but it's a learning process. We cannot revert to the primitive condition, because that would be to go against the law of progress. Again, we cannot unlearn what we already have learned. So it is impossible to regress to the state of nature, even if we try very hard, because we cannot go back to our primitive instincts. We can act on them still, and many do, but we cannot go back to that. Okay.
Hey, João, in the case that we're studying the spirits that are being quote unquote removed to a planet of trial expiation, that probably will be on the level of this
Primitive beings.
Primitive beings, even though they already evolved past that point, even if they find themselves in a planet that is at that stage, they will not behave that way. They will do like the Egyptians, Mayans, or whatever when they get to the place.
Yes. Emmanuel in the book On the Way to the Light talk about those exiles from Capella that went to the different places on earth, and he said that they always carried with them the longing for something that they didn't know exactly what it was, the unhappiness of finding themselves in a place they didn't think they belong, something like that. So that's how these spirits that are being removed from earth are going to feel, right? Because you are going back in time with all your knowledge still present. So you are going to miss something that you don't understand exactly what you are missing. And your moral qualities, even if they are inferior to those here on earth, they are more than those that you are going to find there in that place that you are going to end up. So things that even those that have low moral standards for our understanding nowadays will be shocked by the moral evolvement of those people that they are going to find, the primitive people they are going to find in more primitive planets. So that will make them the leaders of moral and intellectual progress of the places that they are going to find themselves. And because the law is of progress, they are going to help those worlds progress. Can they come back to Earth? Yes. Emmanuel talks about all the exiles from Capella that went into Egypt, that they have all returned already. Those that went to the other three places, many of them are still here, especially the ones that went to the European part of the exiles. But it is possible to go back if you evolve faster than the world you are in. And again, it same applies to Earth, right? There are spirits that can move to a higher, more evolved planet if they make enough progress and they so desire, right? We heard that Bezerra de Menezes was offered this opportunity and decided to stay here to help us. But you can always go back to the place that you came from if you evolve morally enough.
Thank you.
March of Progress.
Yeah.
779. Do humans contain a force within them that propels them forward on the path of progress, or is their progress only the product of education? Human beings develop themselves naturally. Human beings do not progress at the same rate or in the same manner. This is why the most advanced help others move forward through social contact.
Yeah, the law is of progress. So we come with this law imprinted in our conscience. We are going to naturally try to develop ourselves, even if we have no one around us, right? So if you end up in an island isolated from society, that's going to hamper your progress, yes, but you are going to try to learn how to survive and to learn things and to evolve, to protect yourself, to try to build things and to learn from the environment to progress. So we are always learning, and we are always trying to progress, even if we are isolated from society. Now, of course, the rate of progress is different for each one of us. We do not evolve in the same manner and at the same rate. We're going to develop in different speeds and different types of knowledge. That's why the spirits talk to us about an equal society where we impose equality on society. It doesn't work because we have different abilities, and then the next day we will already be different than the others around us, because the law is of progress, but the way we progress are different from each other, right? We have to remember the concept of a mountain, that everybody is going to get to the top, but everybody is going to climb the mountain through different paths and starting from different points of the mountain. But everybody is going to get there to the top sooner or later. That's how it's easier to describe the evolution of humankind, as we are all climbing the mountain, and each at our own speed, and learning as we progress different things, learning from others and learning from ourselves. The advantage of living in society is the opportunity to learn from others, right? Okay.
780. Does moral progress always follow intellectual progress? It is the result, but it does not always follow it immediately. How can intellectual progress lead to moral progress? By making human beings gain an understanding of good and wrongdoing, they can then choose between them. The development of free will follows the development of intelligence and increases the accountability of human actions. How is it then that the most intellectually evolved are often the most deviant? Complete and integral progress is the purpose of life, but nations, like individuals, reach it gradually. Until the moral sense is developed, they may even employ their intelligence in doing evil. Moral sense and intellect are two forces that are balanced over the course of time.
Okay, so the intellectual progress is easier because you need just to accumulate knowledge, right? You put knowledge on top of the knowledge you already had. Moral progress is done by eliminating imperfections. And to eliminate things is always more difficult than to add things. So the intellectual progress, most cases, again, it's not for all of us, but for the vast majority of humans, the intellectual progress comes first. We evolve intellectually until we reach a point that without the moral progress, we can no longer evolve intellectually. How do we know we reach this point? We hit a wall, let's say. It's difficult to describe the wall because it's different for each one and depending on their intellectual and moral progress. But we cannot evolve intellectually indefinitely without evolving morally. We will reach a point that we'll be no longer able to evolve intellectually without the moral progress. And this can be done by reincarnations where we cannot evolve intellectually. We come with intellectual abilities contained or forgot the word. We cannot evolve intellectually, so we will need to evolve morally, learning, patience, resignation, acceptance, because we in one incarnation cannot evolve intellectually. It's one of the ways, it's not always the way, but it's one of the ways we may be forced to evolve morally if we have evolved only intellectually and are abusing our intellectual knowledge. The free will, which is what we all have, that allow us to develop our intelligence, also increases our responsibility, right? The law is of cause and consequence. So the use we make our free will to develop our intelligence and how we can use or abuse it can cause consequences that will lead to difficult situations that may force us to learn and develop our moral side. Again, we're talking here about the extremes, right? Because normally we evolve intellectually more than morally, but we end up also evolving morally and balancing a little bit of both on our progress. We're talking about extreme cases, and we see in the books of André Luiz, we see cases of these leaders of the lower zones that have a lot of intellectual progress and abuse their intellectual knowledge by controlling inferior spirits or imperfect spirits. But we are almost finishing the book Liberation, and the last chapter that we're going to study in a couple of weeks is the rescue of Gregorio, the leader of the lower zones. But we already learned earlier that he's going to have a very difficult incarnation because he's been abusing of his intellectual knowledge and an ability for over 500 years, and now it's time for him to develop the moral aspect, and he's going to, we don't know the details of his next incarnation, but we know it's going to be a difficult one, and his mother from the old times is going to come back as his mother again to take care of him, because we are never alone and we are never left without any assistance. So he's going to have a very difficult incarnation to develop his moral abilities with his intellectual abilities probably compromised, seriously compromised, so he can learn to evolve morally. So that's the last part. When we evolve intellectually too much, we can cause the moral aspect to stay behind, and we abuse it, and then we create problems for ourselves. Okay? Questions?
If you use as an example, let's say, human transportation. At one point, before the domestication of animals, we walked. Then we learned, we gained the ability to domesticate animals. Then we had horses, we have whatever the animals that could be used in accordance to the land where they lived, that required some ethical, social regulation on the use of those animals, right? Property, humane treatment of animals, all those things, right? It's already one step ahead in the moral progress. Then from horses, you go to automobiles. As another big jump. Now you need more regulations. An automobile can be a very dangerous thing. We have to find ways of society to live without automobiles. It can be, in terms of pollution, can be very degrading to human health. We have to create regulations of how we use it. We have to have traffic signs now. We have to be obedient to those little lights that, stop when the light change, go when the light change. There's all those things at a step ahead in our development, moral as well. So the intellectual, it pulls us forward morally speaking as well. There is this symbiotic relationship between those two wings. One cannot go way too far from the other, because then there is a slowdown because the other side has to catch up. And when there's one catch up, it may go a little bit above, and so forth, so one always pulling the other one forward.
Yeah, that's a very good example. And again, you're going back to the animals, right? Why we take care of the animals? For selfish reasons, right? Because we don't want the horse to die, because we need the horse to transport. So in order for the horse not to die, we need to take care of it. And to provide food, to provide shelter, because we learn that by helping the animal live longer, and we can use it for a longer time. It's the intellectual helping the moral side, as Elmo said, right? So that's how we humans progress. That's a very good example. Okay. All right, I think we're going to stop here. We have 1 minute left. We come back next week. We continue on the march of progress next week. So we have some events happening in the near future that I want to go through here. We have our Mediumship Forum of New York happening on February 5th from 2 to 4 p.m. here at SGNY, room 4A. You should have received the email this week. It's better if you can register so we can evaluate the number of people, but you don't really need to register. It's on a Sunday from 2 to 4 p.m. here in the 4th floor of SGNY. In that bigger room that we have here on the 4th floor. Okay, the forum is Lifting the Veil: Communications with Spirits. We are going to have short presentation on mediumship according to Spiritism, and then we have a testimonial, and we have Q&A session. The lecture that we have this Saturday is by Marcia Trajano, Becoming Your Best Self, which is a reflection on our responsibility to identify our goals in the face of the opportunity we're giving during our current experience. This process provides us with a moment to confirm our personal objectives, commitments, and aspirations. It's based on Chapter 17 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, guidelines that lead us the way to achieving our transcendental responsibility. So this is Saturday at 11 a.m. through the United States Spiritist Federation YouTube, Facebook, and the International Spiritist Council YouTube page. And also next week, starting on February 3rd, there will be a new course promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation in association with Divaldo Franco's Mansão do Caminho, which is Psychology and Spirituality, a Bridge to a Better Life. It's a podcast type series that's going to be through YouTube, every week an episode. It's going to be every Friday at 6 p.m. based on the works by Joana de Angelis. Jussara is conducting it with Dr. Anair Fonseca, and other guests that will discuss psychology and spirituality based on the works of Joana de Angelis. For those that have been studying Joana de Angelis with Jussara on Tuesdays, I'm sure it's a very good addition to the work. Book Club, Chapter 4 next week of the book Hail Christ. Okay? Carol, can you do our final prayer?
Sure. Thank you very much, John and Elmo and Philip. Thank you for reading, and thank you everyone for participating this evening. Infinite Creator and Supreme Intelligence, we give thanks again to be together for our studies of the Spirit's book, our study involving isolation and silence and the law of progress. The balance of talking and listening is ideal. Moderate periods of isolation and silence may be helpful if it is not extreme or completely removed from society. We should adopt and respect the natural law of progress. Family and social ties are essential for human and spiritual growth, which is God's law. We cannot regress to the primitive state of nature. We have free will, and hopefully we can use it to develop both intellectual and moral aspects of our life. Again, balance is ideal. We give thanks to the spiritual benefactors, the good spirits who are with us this evening. They are guiding us, inspiring us, and bringing us a greater understanding of the topics at hand. We are grateful for their love, their patience, their guidance in each and every one's lives. And may we respect these guides that help us to go forward in a positive way, to be in relationship to the law of progress. May the love, light, and peace of Christ go with us this evening. And may we also be able to share the energy and the topics with others who may be receptive as we use our discernment to impart this knowledge and information. For we know that we are never alone. There is always help. There is always guidance as we ask and as we do our part. And may we continue with our prayers, with our studies and mindfulness throughout the week. And may we completely open our hearts and our minds to the possibility of our progress. We know that we can do it. We can do bit by bit, step by step, each day. We humbly ask now to pray for our inner peace as well as the world peace, for we know that beings of physical and spiritual sides need our assistance. We pray for SGNY and all spiritist centers throughout the world that they may grow, expand, and continue to bring forth the light and love. We close now and humbly ask to go forth in safety and protection to our family, friends, and loved ones. And may we remind ourselves to be beacons of light. Go forth now in love, light, and peace. So be it.